It is the 21st century. There are too many video games. But out there, it's waiting. The best video game you've never played.
Hello and welcome to The Best Video Game You've Never Played, the podcast where I, stand-up and improv comedian Lewis Dunn, sit down with a guest to go over a video game that they think is brilliant that I haven't played. I play it for a week, get back to them, and we have a chat about whether or not it is the best video game you have never played. This week's guest is Zack Sizer. Zack is a wonderful improv comedian who does all sorts of shows all over the place. One of his main projects is the Iliad, which is improvised myths and legends. They take suggestions from things from Egyptian mythology, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and they come up with a brand new myth to explain something about the world using the mythology of your choice. It's a wonderful, very, very funny show. It's been all over the place. It's been to Edinburgh. It's been to Brighton. I understand that they are planning more shows in the future. There's currently nothing on the schedule right now, but if you go find them on Twitter, they do some very, very funny content regarding myths and legends. Zack is also part of Any Suggestions Doctor, the improvised Doctor Who Parody, which is the show that I'm in and that I produce. And he's very, very funny on that. Any Suggestions Doctor is, of course, on tour right now. Go to anysuggestionsimprov.co.uk to find out where you can see that show. But we are here to chat video games, and Zack has brought along... Well, he's brought along a video game that was a very interesting project for me, because he also suggested about a few other games, and we'll get to that in the podcast, but I think this game in particular really, really was like stroking a cat the wrong way on me. This is really something I was thinking about how it was so not going to be my thing, and I think we'll find that this conversation is a very interesting confrontation of that bias that I have towards this genre. So, without any further ado, let's join now as we speak to Zack about his game of choice. Hello, Zack. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Lewis. How are you?
I'm okay. I've been having a very strange few weeks, Zack, because you have... So, look, I should let the listener know. I asked you to come on this podcast actually quite a long time between now and when you came on to record. And that's because life has been bizarre over the past few months. You know, lockdowns and no lockdowns, and we're doing a tour together now and all sorts of weird things. But the thing that happened mostly was that you recommended 4 games to me, and every single one of them I wanted to play.
Yeah. Well, I sent you a long list of games, and you played a good number of them, which is fair. A lot of them were, you know, sort of quite well-known, really good games, such as, you know, God of War, etc.
Yes, yeah. And I could talk forever about God of War. I think God of War is one of the best games that came out in the last generation of consoles.
But then there was some that you hadn't played, which was good.
Well, there was a weird situation that happened. So I'm gonna let the listener behind the curtain now, which is that we essentially narrowed it down to 3 games. One of which was the Fire Emblem game on Switch, Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Yes.
And initially I committed to that.
Yeah.
And then I looked up how much Fire Emblem Three Houses is, and I went, I would like to reconsider my choice.
That's fair enough. It's a spenny game.
It's just Nintendo games, man. They're just a pain in the
ass. And they never go down. Like, this is the problem with Nintendo games. You can wait 10 years, and they'll have gone up to £300.
Yes.
And I don't know why.
Like we were discussing before this, there's GameCube games you're currently looking for that are just...
It's ridiculous.
So I backed off that, but then there were the 3 other games you recommended. I owned all of them.
Good.
And I'd played at least a little bit of all of them.
Okay. Yes.
So the first one, which I initially was really tempted to do, was Final Fantasy VII Remake. Mm-hmm. Because I played that during my break between Series 1 and Series 2 of the podcast, and I loved it. I absolutely really loved Final Fantasy, and I did not expect to love Final Fantasy VII Remake, because I don't like turn-based JRPGs.
that bodes well.
But it turns out Final Fantasy VII is not a turn-based JRPG.
It's not a turn-based.
It's sort of, what if Kingdom Hearts wasn't shit?
Yeah.
And it was really good, and I loved it. And I didn't expect to love it, and I thought it was going to be full of fan servicey nonsense, and then actually it was, but it didn't matter too much.
Yeah, it's a game that gets a little bit bogged down, and you're like, I don't mind too much, because there's enough going on still.
I know that there's a ongoing plot thing in Final Fantasy VII Remake to do with time travel and the fact it is a remake and it's very meta. But I still, even though I know that was there, I was like, oh yeah, okay, fair enough. I wasn't destroyed by it.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't play the original.
I've not played the original much. I think I played the original for about 4 hours on the computer, and I was kind of liking it, though it is incredibly hard to take seriously when there are all these weird little dolls.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And see, I've never played it. I played about 3 hours on the Switch version.
Yeah.
After I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I was going in completely blind to what this story is, who these characters were, which is potentially why I enjoyed it a lot more than the internet seems to, who were like die-hard original Final Fantasy VII fans.
Yeah, I'm stunned actually, because obviously that was a weirdly good year for games. It was last year, wasn't it? 2012. You had Last of Us Part 2, you had Final Fantasy VII Remake, Hades was last year, Half-Life Alyx. I was stunned Final Fantasy VII Remake didn't break 90 on a Metacritic or OpenCritic. I thought, after I was playing it, I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, what quality are you expecting from this? I thought, but obviously it's because it's kind of, it's there because of the original and the nostalgia people love for it, but also it's held back by the fact that people have nostalgia and love for the original, and they're like, it's not quite what I thought.
And you've changed it, and it's not the same, and
yeah, and it's not the same, and that's why I thought it was really good.
Yeah, exactly. They've updated it for 20 years later.
But we're not doing Final Fantasy.
We're not doing that one.
We're not doing Final Fantasy VII Remake. The next game you recommended was Ghost of Tsushima.
Yep.
Which was also another brilliant game that came out in 2020.
Yes.
That I got for my birthday last year, and I've played about 15 hours of Ghost of Tsushima.
Okay.
And I have a weird relationship with the game, which is that I think it's really, really good, but I only want to play it when I am in the mood for a samurai revenge film, and I'm in a sort of low, calm, serious mood.
Yeah.
I don't find it like... In the same way that when I was playing God of War... Every minute I wasn't playing God of War, I was like, I can't wait to get back to playing God of War.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Whereas Ghost of Tsushima, it's more like I'll remember I have it and go, oh yeah, I'll go play some more. That'd be nice.
Yeah. I do like just wandering in Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
In the same, I really enjoy wandering in Red Dead Redemption 2 and just being in that world for a little bit and fun things just popping up and I'll go and do that and I'll do that. And I enjoy that in Ghost of Tsushima. But it's a little bit more boring than Red Dead 2 in that, because there isn't as much just popping up.
No, but it's a beautiful game to look at.
It is.
I feel like the reason I'm not making much progress in Ghost of Tsushima isn't because like the mission design's bad or the story isn't compelling or anything like that. It's just because I will get distracted by I'll find a camp and I'll be like, what's in here then?
I think every time I climbed a shrine, it took me about 3 times as long because I get to the top and enter photo mode and just fiddle with filters and movement and everything at the top and just save it as a screenshot and never look at it again. But I'm like, that was a nice picture.
But this is the thing, is Ghost of Tsushima again was very tempting because I haven't finished it and I could have picked it and gone for finishing it. The reason we didn't do Final Fantasy VII Remake is I think it would have been an easy win.
Yeah.
I think you would have, if this podcast was Final Fantasy VII Remake, is it the best game you've ever played? It would be yes. I was amazed how much I love it. With Ghost of Tsushima, I think we would have had a very boring podcast about us just going, yes, nice. It's just nice.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
So now we're going to get to the game that we are actually going for.
Yes.
Which I checked with you before. You are still willing to back. You are still willing to say, no, I love this. I thought it was really good.
I really love this game. Yes.
That game is Persona 5. Now, this is fascinating to me, Zach, because I have Persona 5 because I got the PlayStation Plus collection with my PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
I just like reminding people I have a PlayStation 5. It's just nice. I got in early. I immediately pre-ordered it. I'm very happy with it. I started playing Persona 5 a little bit when I got my PlayStation 5, and I went, oh, this is all right. Mm-hmm. And then I got distracted by all the other stuff that came on the PlayStation 5. I played God of War, I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, all these other things. And then you had it on your list, and I went, it was all right, actually. It's kind of interesting. So why don't you introduce to the audience what Persona 5 is? So,
it's a tricky game to describe, because it melds a lot of different genres, or two specific genres. So it's a JRPG, so a Japanese RPG. So it is a turn-based RPG in terms of the combat and most of the gameplay, but it's also sort of a social sim at the same time, and it merges that sort of having to build relationships with people and live your day-to-day life alongside dungeon crawling and JRPG combat mechanics. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to go into a bit about the story, or?
Well, I think you've said it's a social sim.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know what that means. I don't know if I could say any other game that comes to mind that would be the genre social sim.
Oh, well, I mean, this is funny because Fire Emblem Three Houses is pretty similar. It's pretty similar. Basically, you when you're not dungeon crawling and JRPGing and doing all the turn-based combat with your personas and all of that, you're hanging out as a Japanese schoolboy, living day-to-day life in his school days, building relationships with colleagues or other, what are they called? Classmates.
Confidants
is what they're called in the game.
Yeah.
So classmates, people around Japan. You journey around Tokyo. It's got very well realised actual real world locations around Tokyo,
which is also interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. I can't off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of another game that you would classify as
this is the thing I'm more getting
social
at.
Sim?
Is you've gone for social sim. I would go for visual novel.
Yeah, interestingly, they've made mangas of Persona 5. So you can get the full story in a manga. You can also watch the full story as an anime.
You can.
Both after... They did those after the game came out. So it wasn't like they did them and then went, oh, this would make a good game. They did the game and then made those because they were like, oh, this would make a good manga or a good anime.
I actually found out, and if you're listening to this and you're interested, the Persona 5 anime is actually on all four.
It is.
So you can go and watch Persona 5 story. So this is the thing that's interesting about Persona 5. So yeah, you've also hinted towards the story there. You play as a Japanese schoolboy.
Yes.
But that's not actually who you are in terms of like what the game is actually about. Is you are a supernatural thief?
Yeah, sort of. So it essentially opens. You have you are on parole or probation. You're on probation because you stopped an assault happening, and it turned out the person that was doing the assault was quite a powerful person. So blamed it on you, said you'd assaulted him, and you get put on probation and sent to Tokyo to just live there for a year and keep your nose clean and be a good little Japanese schoolboy. And then somehow you become a thief of hearts, a phantom thief of hearts, where you venture into people's distorted desires. This is all sounding very wanky.
With Persona. This is one of the things that's so hard about Persona. Because everything you've said so far is basically correct.
Yeah.
It's not quite correct.
No.
Because it's impossible to explain. Basically, Persona has a real world.
Yeah.
That is sort of the world we know, and then it has a world of just constant allegory and metaphor where the rules are really difficult to understand and follow.
100%. So they call that the metaverse.
Yeah.
And you get there through an app in your phone because a strange man in a prison contacted you while you're sleeping. And then a cat who talks to you starts teaching you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And you have to venture into this metaverse. For the most part, you can venture into it in other ways, but for the most part, you venture in places called palaces, which are where really bad people, their desires have become so distorted that they view a real world location as a different location that they have control over, and you have to go in and try and steal their treasure in order to try and reconcile them to the awful things that they have done.
It's a massive, weird, inconsistent metaphor that is still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't... The problem with it is not necessarily the idea. I feel like in a lot of ways they're obsessed with explaining it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like they could have had the confidence to back away and just go, oh, in the metaverse, people's like self-image manifests into evil.
Yeah.
Except the metaphor doesn't necessarily constantly carry, because in this metaverse there are demons that are people, but they're not people.
Yeah.
But they serve the people who have the evil desires,
Yeah.
even though they themselves do not. Though they are literal demons, because Persona is actually a spin-off from a series called Shin Megami Tensei,
Yep.
which is set, I think, a few hundred years after Persona.
I've got no idea.
It's like this. It's like, it sounds like the most insane, complicated thing in the world, and the reason it sounds like the most insane, complicated thing in the world is because it's been written by people who really love that Japanese high school supernatural melodrama.
Yep.
And that is a genre that exists, and Persona is almost trying to be subversive with that genre in some respects. It's just that, I don't know about you, I'm not massively familiar with the high school melodrama Japanese genre. The most I can think of is I watched Death Note as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I liked Death Note, and I've gone back to watch it as an adult, and I'm like, this doesn't hold up.
See, I've never been a big fan of anime.
Yeah.
I've tried a few, and I mean, I think the one that I got the most into is not about high school at all. It's Attack on Titan, which I managed to watch for about a season, and then I think in the second season, most of it is just recapping what happened in the previous episode and what was going to happen in the next episode, and there was about 5 minutes of content. So I've never been hugely into that side of it. I think I was just taken by initially the art style of it as well. If it was just presented in an art style similar to something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I don't think it would work. I think it works because of the art and the music and everything that goes along with the gameplay. It does feel like you are, it sounds wanky, but it feels like you are, watching an anime, but also in it, and it's weird, man.
It does the thing that no Simpsons game has ever successfully done, which is adapt a 2D anime art style into 3D very successfully.
Yes.
Like every still image of the game looks like an anime frame, but when it moves, it looks like a 3D game, and it works, and it looks really good. And this is one of the most stylish games I've ever played. Every menu is brimming with art, and it's got cool, low-key jazz under lots of it, and it's got, like, the loading screen has take your time, is what it says. So obviously, pun on the fact that it's loading, but then also it's literally the game going like, chill out. This game's hundreds of hours long. Don't worry about it.
Slow.
You're not going to win by just mashing through it. And it's really self-confident in what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And there's no ambiguity about whether or not you're right, I don't think in like 10 years time they're going to do like Persona 5 remastered and we'll be like, finally it looks like it should. It looks like it will always look. It's kind of spot on.
Yeah, it's a bit ageless in terms of its art style. It's in the same way that certain, SNES games still look fab, despite the fact that, they're 20, 30 years old.
You've got that weird trend now, which Square Enix are doing with, I think they're doing it with Octopath Traveler, and they're doing it with triangle strategy.
That's the one.
And it's like, what if we made sprites have realistic looking lighting? And you're like, it looks awful.
I played a good. I think I did about 10 hours in Octopath Traveler before I just got really bored of Octopath Traveler. Mainly because it was like you were just looking at the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's just weird and brown and blue, but it's just a bizarre looking game. But Persona 5 nails down its look. I think it's stylish. I love the music.
The music's fab. It's brilliant.
It does need more than one battle track. As my wife, who has been in the background while I've been playing Persona, will eventually come over, put her hand on my shoulder and say, please put in headphones. Because the battle theme's brilliant. I love the battle theme. I listened to it in the car, Last Surprise.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant song. It's just every single fight in the game uses the fucking same song.
Yeah. I can't remember. So this is a disclaimer as well.
Yeah.
We have technically played slightly different versions of this game.
Yes.
So you've played Persona 5, just the standard
Just Persona 5,
theatrical release Persona 5. And I've played Persona 5 Royal, which is this slightly updated version. I think it came out 2 years after the original.
It's a really annoying thing, actually, because I think if Persona 5 Royal was like an upgrade I could buy, I would have considered it. But if you want to play Persona 5 Royal, you have to buy the entire game. And you can't pick up your save file from Persona 5 and move it to Persona 5 Royal.
No. You can get some bonuses by doing that.
Oh, great.
But no, it's because I think it's balanced slightly differently. So that the way that it plays is slightly different. There's some different mechanics, etc. in there. There's different new confidants that you can build relationships with. But for the most part, it is a very, very... They're basically the same game. I think got the same story.
This is what I was going to say. I think if you were to play it through beginning to end, it's going to have the same major story beats, as it were.
Royal adds an epilogue if you do certain things in the game.
Well, this is the thing.
Which they don't explain to you that you need to do to get that epilogue, but, you just have to figure it out.
There's a very annoying trick that some games have, which is known as buy a cheat book and know how to actually do it properly. But this is the thing. I've only played... So this is the thing. People listening now, and I'm sure you will be like... I've only played 13 hours of this game, which in the scheme of this game's about 100 hours long if you from playing
approximately, it's about 100 hours.
So I'm literally 13% into this game.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will be there now. Particularly if you're a Persona 5 fan, get ready to be scoffing at me and saying, "Oh, it doesn't count. Because I'm gonna." The problems I have with Persona 5. So this is the thing we've talked about.
Cool.
We've talked about I think the things that work for it amazingly are that it's stylish, it sounds good, it looks great, and that was enough to get my interest. Because big disclaimer, I really don't like JRPGs. The only JRPG I think I've ever finished are Pokemon games.
Yeah, they sort of count.
And my relationship with Pokemon games is I hate Pokemon. But for some reason, I play them beginning to end. The whole time just going, attack, the best attack I've got, off it goes.
And I think this is what makes Persona better, is that it isn't just that. It's not just that all the time.
It's not.
That's a good part of the game.
It is. It's a big chunk of the game.
But you can make that better with the other parts of the game.
So let's just stay with the combat in Persona 5. Persona 5 has a turn-based RPG system. And it's an interesting one because it's not Pokemon. No. It's not I use Thunderbolt, you use Quicksand, let's just back and forth to it. There are little tricks and clever little puzzle mechanics to it. So you can, if you hit an enemy with an attack they are weak to, you get another go.
Yeah.
And you can also swap between your party members when you get your other go. So you can chain together, essentially, an unstoppable pattern that means the opponent never gets to land a blow.
Yep.
But it's at the cost of your magic, usually.
Yeah.
Or your ammo. You have like a limited amount of ammunition on a gun that each of the characters has. Side note, I thought it was brilliant in a game where you're like using fire and like using like classic JRPG style magic stuff, and then one of them is just gun.
Bring out your gun.
Just shoot them in the head. That's pretty cool. Until you know how to do it, and then it's every single fight. And there's no reason not to take the most optimal route, except you can't just tell the game that. You can't just tell the game, take the most optimal route. You can tell the game to do something called rush mode, which is where it just will automatically do attack until the enemy's dead, and then you will live with the consequences of having told it to do that. So your health will drop to whatever amount's appropriate. I think in the rush mode as well, it will automatically heal if someone has the ability to, and it's the right thing to do. There's a little bit.
I've ever used rush mode at all.
This is the thing I think is interesting then, because it told me there's rush mode. You can use rush mode against weak enemies. Don't worry about it. And I found out that using rush mode is a terrible idea because it will never use the weakness strategy, which is obviously the best way to play the game and is obviously the thing you should do every single time. So it's given me an option to go, we get it. JRPGs are grindy, and sometimes you just want to mash attack until it's done. Except doing that is a terrible idea and you shouldn't do that. But also, the thing that is frustrating about JRPGs is they love to interrupt themselves. So you'll be travelling through an environment, you'll get into a fight, the fight screen will come up, that'll take about 15 seconds of like, welcome, here's the villains, here's you, right, here's your menu, go. You do the fighting, fair enough. I don't find turn-based strategy that exciting, particularly in this game where it's like, there is literally an optimal strategy. We've remembered and told you. Use fire, use wind, you're done.
Yeah.
So there's no gameplay anymore now. Now I'm just navigating menus until I'm doing the right thing.
Okay.
And then at the end of every single fight, without exception, even if I've told it to rush, there is a 30-second breakdown of me getting 240 yen, 13 experience.
But it's jazzy.
You get maybe an item, there's a little animation. Yeah. Especially if you've wiped out the enemy perfectly, you get like a little splash screen.
If you do the or if you can knock down all enemies, so when you hit them with a weakness, they get knocked down. If you knock down all enemies, then you can do an all-out attack with the whole team. Getting in on it, and then it does a nice little animation at the end with whoever you used to do that all-out attack. They get a little
cool,
animation,
and it's stylish, and it looks great, and it sounds great, and I've seen it 20 times, and I'm done with it. And it's so frustrating that there's clearly the rush mode exists because they know turn-based strategy games get boring. They know there comes a stage where you are wiping out enemies with a single hit. And yet, there is no button to skip the end of the match.
Yeah, no.
That's
part of the take your time, though, Lewis. You just got to take your time.
No, but there's taking my time and then there's wasting my time. There's wasting it. And look, I'm under no illusions that probably it's to mask a loading screen.
It's likely to be fair, right, so this game was developed on the PS3. So it wasn't... It was started in development in about 2011.
Gosh, no, is it on the PS3?
It's not on the PS3. It was.
I think it is
mainly developed on the PS3. It's not, because the PS2 was when Persona 4 came out, and then they announced Persona 5 way back. I think it was about 2011. They announced this game, and then it took so long for it to come out. I think it came out in 2016, 17.
I'm convinced it also came out on the PS3.
I don't think it did, but it was developed for the PS3. So this is potentially why they had some masking of potential loading screens.
I've checked. It is on the PS3.
Is it on the PS3?
It actually launched on the PS3. It came out in 2016 and it launched on the PS3.
Did it launch on the PS4 as well at the same time?
Yeah.
In 2016?
In 2016.
Wow. Well, it's accessible, that's for sure. You don't need to have a PlayStation 4. I don't think Royal definitely didn't come out on the PS4.
No. Royal came out just for the PS4. This is the thing that's interesting about, just as a little sidebar. Persona 5 is absolutely, I think, for the series, it's the biggest game in the series.
Oh, 100%.
So it's bigger than all the Shin Megami Tensei games. It's bigger than all the other Persona games. It's in Smash Brothers. You can play.
It's the first announced DLC fighter for Smash Bros. Ultimate.
It is only on the PlayStation. It's absolutely
mad.
The spin-offs are on all the other platforms. You can get Persona 5 Strikers on everything else. There's Persona 5 Dancing in the Moonlight or whatever. That's on everything else. But Persona 5, for some weird reason, is on the PS3, the PS4, and nothing else.
That's it.
Even though it's a PS3 game. So it could obviously run on the Switch. Even though it would be way better on the Switch. Because
it would work on the Switch. I think it's a game that would work really, really well on the Switch. And on the go, it's a good a game just to pull out, have a little go on the train.
Yeah, I honestly think it would make sense as a handheld game, and I know it makes sense as a handheld game because the other big entry in the series is Persona 4, of which everyone says the best version is on the PlayStation Vita. Yeah. To the extent that people say buy a PlayStation Vita for Persona 4, that is enough reason to get it. I understand why, and it's because of this repetition. It's because if you're playing in a handheld burst, if you're sitting down and you've got like 10, 20 minutes, you do a little fight, you have a little, explore a little area, do some little turn-based combat, maybe you get some dialogue, maybe you improve a relationship with someone, you put it away, that's great. Yeah. That, I think, is the ideal way to play this game.
See, right, so the one thing that you need to add to this as well is obviously the demons that you encounter.
Oh, yes, this mechanic,
you can essentially capture.
Yeah, it's Pokemon.
In a similar, but in a very different way to Pokemon.
Well, kind of.
In that you have to persuade them to join you, basically, by talking to them. You have to. I can't remember what what they call it.
You basically
You negotiate with them.
And there is a way to do it properly. I remember looking in the tutorials, it's like if a demon is like standoffish, they like jokey answers. If a demon is gloomy, they don't like chipper answers.
Yeah.
And like you're supposed to, but I don't think anyone's. I didn't remember that. Every single time I'm talking to a demon, I'm just like, probably that.
I just went with, I think the little cat pops up in the top corner and goes, "Oh, better not be too jokey with this one." Or, "Oh, it looks a bit sad. Try to cheer it up."
That is not in Persona 5.
Is that not?
No, that's a Persona 5 Royal Edition.
So there you go. So I think they must have realised that it was just...
It was weird.
Like, there was no way of knowing this, so that they popped it in the top-hand corner.
But now we're in a position where the game's going... press the joke button. All right, now press the happy button.
But I still get it wrong. Because some of them, they seem jokey, and then you click on them, and it goes, "Oh, I didn't like that." It's like, what? Why not? It seems like a joke.
This is kind of my problem with it, though.
Oh, I disagree.
It's not a great mechanic. The idea that you can steal enemies' powers and use them, that is a good mechanic. Pokemon has proven that everyone loves that idea. And it means that fights are more interesting. When you encounter a new monster for the first time, there's a little part of you that goes, maybe I can grab their persona and use it. Except, the personas aren't that different. They generally share the same pool of spells. There's nothing about grabbing a new persona. It should be said, the way the persona system works is you capture personas by persuading them.
Yeah.
And then you go into a menu and you select the persona that you would like the protagonist to relate to. The protagonist doesn't turn into the persona.
No.
They don't like... There's like one that's like a knight on a horse.
Yep.
It just means that like in the back of his head he's thinking about him or something.
Yeah, so in the when you're in the dungeons or in the palaces, the personas sort of form your backup. They are like the thing that is casting magic for the most part, or doing heavy physical attacks. You as a character, all you can do is hit them with your melee weapon, or shoot them with your gun, or run away, or block, or guard yourself. That's basically the only thing that you can do. But you can channel your persona, which for the most part, the original personas that you have, the main cast of characters, the Phantom Thieves, the people that you recruit, their personas tend to be famous rebels, whether from history or literature, etc. Because you're supposed to be rebelling against the everyday flow of just going, that's that. I'm just
There's a very strong through line about justice and injustice, and it takes rebellious action to break injustice, which is an interesting, cool thing. But yes, as you say,
and then the personas that you find in dungeons, for the most part, they are things like demons, but there's also a lot of creatures from mythology that pop up in there.
Yeah, there's a Kelpie. I was glad to see the Kelpie.
There's a Kelpie. Later on, you can just get Thor. This is sort of delving into spoilers, depending upon how in depth we want to go. But there's different themed palaces, and the creatures that you find in the palace, for the most part, tend to fit within the theme of the palace.
Yeah.
So there's a big pyramid one, so you're going to get lots of Egyptian gods, etc. in there.
Yeah.
So you can capture them or negotiate with them, and you can use them in battle straight away, or more usefully, you can go back to what's dubbed the Velvet Room, which is where you are in a jail cell, and the weird old man behind a desk with his two children,
It's just so cryptic.
Jail wardens.
It's just so annoyingly cryptic.
Igor behind.
He refuses to explain anything to you. It's mostly on the cat.
Yes, the cat pretty much does the heavy lifting. I'm not going to lie. The cat is crucial. Without that cat, would not know what's going on. But I like the relation to Pokemon. In Pokemon, you build up your friendship with the Pokemon, you get them up a level, you nurture them, and then they evolve into a new creature that's more powerful with new moves. In this one, you put hoods on the two personas, put them in guillotines, and execute them to merge them into a new, more powerful persona,
which I agree with you, is a very cool mechanic, because it incentivizes catching even weak enemies.
Yes,
because you can make the combinations later, and you're like, okay, if I bank a load of these guys, I can combine them up into a more powerful thing and then use that.
And they can carry across, depending upon, and this is where the confidants come in.
Yeah.
Depending upon your relationship with people in the real world, who are assigned essentially a tarot card name. So you've got the Faith persona, the Empress persona, the Sun, etc. Depending upon what their confidant is and your level with them will increase the power of the persona that you make from these fusions. So in a way, you're building up your relationships to make your time in the dungeons better by being able to use better, more powerful personas.
While at the same time, you're also leveling up the character you are playing as.
Yes.
He needs to level up in order to use more powerful personas. So just to be clear, the progression system inside of Persona is you need to capture personas, combine them into more powerful personas, have a chat with people to improve the ability to make confidants so that make better personas, level up your character by grinding in dungeons.
For the most part. I mean, again, with the confidants, you can build your relationship with the confidants quicker by having a persona in your party that is of that confidant style.
Zach, this is the most complicated thing
but it's
any
not...
game has asked me to keep track of.
But when you get into the flow of it, it's not complicated at all.
I am not confident I have ever got into the flow of Persona. Because ultimately, at the end of all of this mad process, I pick the persona with the highest number, and then I hit attack.
Oh, but this is the problem. You want to pick the one that has you want to look at their skills, so what they can do. You also want to look at what they're weak to and what types of attacks the personas against you are using.
But you can't change persona mid-fight.
You can.
What?
Maybe this is a royal edition. You can change your persona.
I did not find...
Each turn, you can change your persona.
I didn't know that. That might be a royal thing.
I don't know. I don't know if
this
is a royal thing.
But does it take a turn? Is it like in Pokemon when you swap a Pokemon?
You can just swap it.
You can just do it?
Yeah.
All right, well, I feel vindicated. I've played the game for 13 hours, and I didn't know you could do that.
To be fair...
To make the point that I'm saying about this, which is, this is the most complicated levelling up system in any video game I've ever played, and yet I just still pressed attack. There's so many layers of expectation of things you are supposed to keep track of, and I don't know how helpful it is to actually bother.
See, I think with the rush mode and with just attacking, it's very useful early game. Especially when you're trying to get through one of these palaces, because you do need to conserve your SP. It's really hard to find items to restore your SP.
In particular in the first main dungeon of the game, because after that, you will be taught how to make coffee, which will restore your SP. Yeah. So it's kind of like the game is going, we know the reason you can't beat the first dungeon in one go is because we're deliberately not letting you get SP any other way.
And they sort of don't want you to defeat the first dungeon in one go. So the idea is, after you've finished a day in the real world, you can go to your hideout with your pals and decide that you're going to go into the palace to try and clear the palace. You've got to... Essentially, each of the palaces function as a heist. You have to figure out your route to the treasure at the end of the palace by clearing through it and finding a route in. Except you sort of don't. I mean,
no. I think
clear
you
the
do.
palace
I
and then
think
you can just fast travel to the last safe.
This is the thing this is a weird feature about Persona, is that you don't go into a dungeon and beat it like you would necessarily. Again, the comparison point I have is Pokemon. So in Pokemon, you would go into something like Mount Moon, or you'd go into Victory Road, and you're going through a dungeon. And the idea is you've got to get from the start of the dungeon to the end of the dungeon without wiping out your team. And then when you get to the end, poke a center, save the game, you're good. Persona's attitude is to go, welcome to the dungeon. You're going to fight through the dungeon for as long as you can. And then when you get weak, you go to a save room, you leave the dungeon, you go and do other things, and then you come back. And it's weird the first time it happens. Like, the first time I'm playing Persona 5, and it's basically going like, you should just leave the dungeon. And I'm like, but I've made so much progress. I've fought so many enemies. What do you mean, just leave the dungeon? The game's like, no, you'll be alright, don't worry. You'll be fine, you can go away and come back.
It is, it's a strange thing to...
And then when you get it, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about doing it all in one go. Except, they also put a time limit.
Yes.
You have to do it in X many days. They're not literal days, they're like in-game days.
In-game days, yeah.
So you should try and get as far as you can in the dungeon in a single go, but you shouldn't expect to finish the dungeon.
No.
But there's a time pressure.
Yeah.
But don't feel too much of the time pressure, because if you run out of time, they'll rewind the days a bit and you can try again, but you will lose the progress you made. This is very stressful.
It is quite stressful, and I think this is it sort of replicates, I suppose, what the characters are feeling. It is quite and as you move through the dungeons, as you move through the palaces, you start off with weaker enemies, which are quite easy to get rid of.
Yeah.
Then you move on, and as you get into the end of the dungeon, there's some really tough enemies there. So part of the process is going, right, I'm going to leave it for today, go out, and then I can take the treasure that I've collected, because you can steal treasure as you're going along, take that to this airsoft shop and sell it all to this creepy guy who's a bit sus, sell all the stuff to him and buy better weapons and guns, and come back fully refreshed, all your SP's are back, health is back, new weapons that do more damage, guns that do more damage, and potentially new armour, etc. You can take this, again, a weird mechanic. You take armour that you find in the dungeon to the laundromat and just wash it, and then you can use it.
I have got some armour that needs washing, but I haven't taken it to the laundromat yet, and we'll get on to why later.
Yeah.
Which is right. This is the thing. Is that this is so complicated. This is so complicated for what is basically. We've described it as a dungeon crawling JRPG, which usually they're complicated because there's like stats to keep track of, and Persona 5 has stats to keep track of.
Yeah, they're a bit redundant for the most part. The stats.
You've got to keep an eye on your personas. You've got to keep an eye on the weaknesses and the strengths that they have. You know, they'll have defense and attack and speed and all of these things. You've got a party of 4. You can control the personas of 1. The rest of the party
have fixed personas.
And you're stuck with those personas for the whole game. So there's a little part of me that goes, okay, they're not going to. I can't fuck this up too much.
Yeah.
Because they put some guardrails in which are like, these 3 personas will basically keep you safe for the whole game.
Yes.
Don't worry too much about it. So I've got to keep track of all that. And then I've got to go into dungeons and get as far as I can, but not too far, and then come out and do the shopping in between.
Yeah.
In a realistic Tokyo.
Yeah.
And a realistic Tokyo includes the fact that it is a rat maze and it is impossible to find the things you are trying to get to.
And again, I'm not sure because I've not played the base Persona 5, but in Royal you can just fast travel to any of those locations once you've been there once.
Once you've been there once, you can, yes.
And for the most part, with the things like the airsoft shop, etc., they take you there in story the first time you go there.
Yes, they do.
So you can't not know how to get to that one because you've been there once, so now you've got it on the fast travel list. So if you want to jump straight there, you can, or you can just take a leisurely stroll around Tokyo. Get on a train.
It's a bit weird with the airsoft shop because you have to do a few story events before it turns up in the fast travel.
Oh right,
but
okay. It's been a while since
it's a nitpick.
Played the start,
but it's also annoying to me because like I said, I started Persona 5 and then I left it, played other games, came back to it. And a lot of this had gone.
Oh yeah. And
I'm
need to commit some time to
where do I
5.
sell things? And I'm looking through all of my options going, well, they won't. But and then like one night I end up in a batting cage. And I'm like,
yeah, that's fun.
That's fun. Except Persona 5 has a weird concept of time, which is I did the batting cage and then it went go to bed.
Yeah.
And I went, but I need to sell things before I go to the dungeon tomorrow. And it went tough. You went to the batting cage. No time to sell things.
And just a query: how far did you get story-wise? Like, have you done? How many palaces have you done?
I finished the first palace.
Yeah,
and I had started the investigation into. I know who is going to be the second palace, as it were. I've got to the stage where I figured out who the next target is for the Phantom Thieves group.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Again, 13 hours. People can scoff and say I'm missing out on some of the deeper mechanics. I am terrified of the deeper mechanics. I am terrified of going further into this game. I'm really scared that Morgana, the talking cat, is going to stop talking and I won't know what to do.
No, so I think in terms of to wrap up the combat-y stuff, I think when you're doing the first palace, the focus is on targeting weaknesses with attacks.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tutorial as well as a blocking tutorial.
Yeah, you can block, etc. It's not as important in the first palace. It's really trying to make you focus on, if you knock them down, you get another go, you can baton pass to another character, which increases the damage of their attack, and if you knock them all down, you can do an all-out attack. When you get into later palaces, where some of the things that you're going up against don't have any weaknesses, and you have to try and inflict conditions, etc., you already have that basic knowledge of the weakness system
but
from the start.
I'm scared of this.
So it's bringing you will get a hang of it. It's quite easy once you
I don't
once
know
you
if
get
I will
going.
because there's so much to keep track of. It's so many things I have to keep in my mind while I'm playing this game. And again, I'm not. I just so look. I think it's fair to say I'm just not a fan of the combat. I don't think the combat's necessarily bad. I don't want to be like it's not broken or anything. And I imagine if you like this type of combat, Persona 5 is probably better than most. Because I don't particularly like this combat, and even I was like, this is still... Occasionally, I was like, this is still quite fun. It does do something I love that certainly Pokemon never did when I was a kid. It does do it now, but it didn't used to, which is that the random encounters aren't actually random. You can see the people on the map. And they incorporate another fun mechanic with that, which is that you can sneak up on them and cause an ambush, which means you get the upper hand at the start of the fight. Yeah. There's a weird thing in this game where it's also trying to be a stealth game. And it's clumsy, but kind of charming.
It sort of works. It's not stealth in like an Assassin's Creed style stealth, where you have to properly sneak around, and if you get noticed, everybody just jumps on you. Yeah. It's the idea that if you do stealth up and ambush a shadow, as they're called, then your team gets a full round of actions before they will... you get the upper hand,
and if they attack you, they open the combat by attacking you.
And you can be surrounded, etc., which means that they all get an attack on you.
But also, if they spot you, that increases the awareness in the palace of the evil spirit.
Yes.
So that if that gets to a certain level, you get kicked out, I think?
I don't know. I never got it up to 100%.
I never got up to 100. So
I think it increases the... I think as the security level goes up, the awareness of the shadows go up, so they spot you easier.
Yes, that's true.
Which means that you're more likely to be surrounded by them and get all of them get an attack before you get an attack. So the idea is to try and keep the security level fairly low so that it's easier to sneak up on them and keep the security level low. But you can use items, etc., to reduce the security level if you want to. Like that's available. But you again have to spend precious time.
And again, this is another meter and another thing I have to remember when I'm doing the game. And it's just so... And this is the thing, I kind of liked that mechanic. Because you're normally in a JRPG, movement between areas is purely functional. Normally, movement between areas in a JRPG is like, you press forward, they go forward, we're done. Like, Pokemon in particular, again, it's the one I relate to because it's the most JRPG game I've played. There's, you're basically navigating a maze. Yeah. Every single location you go to. And here, you're navigating a maze, and you have to be aware of where the enemies are, sneak up on them stealth.
Yes.
There's a weird climbing mechanic that's not really a climbing mechanic.
It's using the grappling.
It's like you go near things and you can press X and then you'll jump on top of them.
Yeah, some things you can get up onto.
But not consistently the same things necessarily. You can press a button and it will be like, you can jump on that.
I think it's the trigger that you hold and then you jump up on some stuff.
And again, it's weird,
For the most part, you can also, if you hold down one trigger, you do sort of phantom sense, which is a bit like your sort of Batman Arkham, being able to see the outlines of enemies.
In Assassin's Creed,
Eagle Vision.
Eagle Vision.
That will show where you can jump up on things. It will show where treasure is, what treasure can be stolen, and it will also outline the shadows in a certain color. And depending upon the color, it shows how difficult the shadows are to attack. Green being like these you can just wipe out with an attack.
Yeah, you can rush these.
Red, stay away unless you are fully healed and have lots of SP.
Yeah, or it's necessary to finish fighting.
But I think it's fairly well balanced. I would say the combat. It can get a bit repetitive. But as you get the safe rooms and can just jump into, you don't have to traipse through the whole palace again every time.
That is true.
You can just jump to where you got to, so you're always making progress, which is also good in these dungeon sort of crawly games. You never feel like you're having to repeat the same section over and over and over again.
I think the problem I have with Persona 5's combat, and I'm sure as I get further into the game, this will either change in one direction or the other, but it is simultaneously incredibly simple and the most complicated thing I've ever witnessed in a JRPG.
Yeah, it's as hard as you really want it to be, I suppose. You can just go for the easy route on it, or you can do more complex stuff that will potentially save you SP, which means you can get through the more of the dungeon in one go.
I never felt like during my playtime. I definitely had fights that went south badly.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing. Is like in other games where like you in Persona 5 you can dominate a fight and never get hit, or you can press the wrong button and you will lose that fight.
Yeah,
because if the enemy never lands an attack on you, you'll be like, that was easy. Some enemies, if they get one attack on you, your party member's down instantly. Like it's incredibly dangerous.
Well, this is where the mechanic of the weaknesses and the one more mechanic, where if you get down someone, you get another go.
Yeah,
that works for the enemy as well.
Yes, it does.
So if they down you, then they get another attack. And so that's something it's also looking at what are their strengths and what are the weaknesses, especially of your party members, because they have the same weaknesses throughout the game.
Yeah.
As you progress through, you gain more party members, so you can swap out. So you have different, and they have different types of magic basically that they use. So you start off with one who's really good at electric, fire, wind, and that wind one also has healing. So then later on, you get somebody who has ice, and somebody who has psychic, and somebody who has nuclear type attacks. So you do get different party members. Unless you upgrade a confidant to a certain level, you can't switch them out in game. In a battle, you have to set who you want your party members to be. But it also means that the backup party members don't lose health or SP as you're moving through if they're not being used.
Oh, and then you can swap them out.
So then
for
you
refresh.
can refresh up your team as you're moving through. So I would say the first dungeon is probably the most difficult dungeon because you have just 4 of you.
Okay.
You're learning the combat. Later on, some of the encounters can be really tough, but you're more at ease just moving through one of the palaces.
So this is the thing. I think we've talked extensively about the combat.
Yes.
Which is the thing I was most negative about with Persona 5, because I feel like it was not the genre I liked. Mm-hmm. And rather than it being clever or subversive in a genre I didn't like, it doubled down hard on it. And I think if you are a JRPG fan, Persona 5 is like one of the best of its type. I can imagine if you love this kind of combat, you're going to have a whale of a time. The other thing about Persona 5 that is the biggest deal for it, which is sort of the other side of the gameplay coin, is the story and the social sim side of it.
Yeah.
Now, the story of Persona 5, we've kind of touched on it a bit at the start. Mm-hmm. It's dense. There's a lot of it. And a lot of it is... There's 2 sides of it, one of which is the day-to-day life of high schoolers, and the other side of it is this weird metaverse. Here's a shit ton of rules about demons and personas and occupied metaverse. And some of it's really good. So the stuff, the initial storyline for the first temple, the first dungeon.
Yeah, palace.
The first palace, that's the word, palace. Is that there is a high school teacher who is being abusive to their students.
Yeah. And
it's, when it sneaks up on you, it's not necessarily brought out, but it's immediately quite dark.
Oh, it's very dark.
And, like, there's an escalation during the plot that makes it even darker.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, okay, wow, this game is not... I thought this game was going to be your typical Japanese melodrama high school, when will senpai notice me? I just want to be the best. I've got pressure from my family, etc. And it does have those things. It's just also very mature, and it's very honest about the experience of being a teenager, not in the sense of being a teenager like, oh, I'm coming of age, oh, my body's changing, but the experience of being a teenager of like, wow, adults are abusive and awful, and this world is corrupt and dreadful.
It's like that moment where you realise that your parents don't know everything, and that the government isn't always out to help you. Yeah. And it's I think it deals with quite serious topics quite well, very, very maturely. I think it hints towards stuff rather than necessarily outwardly just showing everything. So, for example, with this abusive teacher, you see hints towards what he's doing in the palace. So the way that he views... Because the idea of the palace is how they view a place. So the school, in his mind, has become a castle, and he is king of the castle. And then the people that are in the castle are his subjects, and he subjects them to pretty awful stuff. And you see that in a sort of over exaggerated sense in
there's a
the
hyper
palace.
literalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get a sense of what he's doing without it ever having to show that.
Well, they do kind of show it.
I mean, they showed the effects of it.
Well, if you go into the palace, there's a sequence in which we find out he's a PE gym teacher.
Yeah.
Former Olympic medal winner. So he's sort of the school are really proud to have him because of the reputation he has of being the Olympic teacher. And the way he maintains his reputation is by abusing is it a volleyball team?
Yeah, so he was an Olympic volleyball champion.
Of all the sports as well,
I know.
volleyball.
I know.
And he physically abuses the volleyball students. And in the palace, you can see sequences in which they're being literally tortured, beaten and hit and things. And apparently, the scale of what's going on in the real world isn't far off this literal exaggeration. And it's very interesting. It's sort of a weird thing where they use that to prove to themselves what's going on, which is a bit weird. They do,
but then they also do, once they see that in the palace, they do an investigation around the school and try to talk to the volleyball team, but the volleyball team are all too scared of him to actually come out and say it, except for one of them who finally does confirm it, and then he's threatened by the teacher.
And the thing, it's sort of there's just that little thing reminded me of when I used to play Phoenix Wright, and it was well, I know what's happened because I've contacted the spirit world, but that doesn't hold up in court.
No.
So
and this is the part of the story is that they are, they have that feeling of helplessness for the most part initially. Yeah. That oh my God, we're going to get expelled. This guy's already got a criminal record. What is going to happen to all of that? And then the opportunity arises where the cat pops up and says, "Well, if you do this,"
it's such a strange.
Yeah, the cat's weird but fun.
I really want to get into the cat, but I can't yet because there's one more element of this story, which is one of the biggest problems I have with Persona 5.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
One of the major parts of this story is that he's not just abusing his students to get successful results.
Yeah.
He is also sexually harassing his students.
Yeah.
Including one of the characters who joins your party, who is a character called Anne.
Yes.
Now, when this happened in the game, I thought was really interesting because initially you're introduced to Anne, and there are rumours around the school that Anne is in a relationship with this teacher.
Yeah.
And you sit down with her, and for some reason, I can't remember the exact reason, but you end up in a diner with her, and she breaks down and explains that the teacher has been harassing her, she doesn't want to be in a relationship with him, and that she sort of hates the fact that everyone assumes that of her. And basically, she goes, I have been sexualized by everyone around me, and nobody wants to listen to me.
Yeah.
And I was really taken aback by it because I was like, this is really interesting, and I really think this is I've never seen this, particularly in Japanese media, that a character has gone, I am a high school student, stop sexualizing me.
I know what your critique is going to be, and it's a very valid critique.
And the problem with this is that even though Anne has a very heartfelt and I think very well written and delivered speech about this, and I was really on board, and I was like, this is subversive. This is a game that's led me into thinking, sexy high school student, and it's gone, no, stop it. Sexy high school student is a damaging and an unhealthy thing, and it's made this poor teenage girl's life a hell. And then the game sticks her in a red catsuit.
I was very bewildered by that move as well.
And it's not just and I kind of get that maybe they were going for this idea of, look, everyone in the Shadow Realm is a bit sexy. That's kind of the thing. You play as Joker, his character's dressed a bit sexy, and your friend turns up and he's a bit of a bruiser, and they sort of make him a bit more rough and tough, and she's turned up in this, and it's meant to be a metaverse reflection, and she's a panther and a rebel.
I think it's I feel like it's something. It's supposed to be something to do with the personas as well.
Yeah.
So Ryuji, who's the first character that you sort of recruit, his persona is Captain Kidd. So his outfit is got a skull. So
it's sort of like a bruiser pirate.
Yeah, so it's
cool.
and it's sort of supposed to reflect how other people see you, I think. And he's supposed to be this everybody's warning you, don't go near him. He's trouble. He's just going to get you into trouble. So when he appears in the metaverse, he's sort of like a biker pirate. And I suppose that's what they were going for with Anne, in terms of everybody hypersexualizes her. So then, and her persona is Carmen, I think.
Yes, it is Carmen.
and so I suppose it's supposed to represent that. I think they missed the mark entirely.
But it gets worse than that.
Yeah.
Because the thing with Anne is, well, initially that happens, and even she's taken aback by it. She's a bit like, really, I'm in this? This seems a bit much. And the game's sort of like, well, it's based on how people perceive you, the metaverse.
Yeah.
The first dungeon also has a clone version of her, which is how the abusive teacher views her, which sticks her in a bikini and makes her a giggly bimbo.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like, this is weird and like unsettling, but I kind of, again, there's a plot reason. There's a it sort of makes sense. And she's horrified by the perception of it, and it makes her angry. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we're developing this sort of idea of it. And then there's a bit where you basically fight his dick.
This game is graphic in a lot. There's a demon later on, which is just penis on wheels.
Like, it's just... And, like, again, I'm kind of like, okay, literal, hyper-literalism, this is what we're going for. His sexual desire is part of his corruption.
See, this is a big difference as well, though, because I think the boss fights are all different between the two games. So I don't know what happens in the Persona 5 boss fights. They might be slightly different in the Persona 5 Royal boss fights.
It certainly wasn't the final boss fight, the perception of him. It's sort of a weird blob monster, which has a very suspicious-looking head.
Oh, I don't know that that's him.
It's meant to be his sort of...
Because there's the big one of him on the toilet, isn't there? Near the end, is that him?
Oh, no, him near the end in the version I played is he's like... what is
weird,
he?
Like,
he's like
king thing.
Yeah, and he drinks from a goblet of...
He's got a knife and
women.
fork.
Yeah, that's him as a boss. But before that, there's like his suppressed desire, suppressed sexual desire. But it's not even suppressed; it just is his sexual desire.
I mean, yeah.
So again, the whole way through this dungeon, I'm going like, look, it's creepy and it's weird, but it kind of makes sense in the story context. And look, they did that thing earlier, and Anne's character is constantly reacting negatively to all this. She's constantly talking about how she doesn't like this and the way she's perceived. So fair enough. You know, the lines are getting blurry and grey, but fine. Except that dungeon ends. Morgana the cat. Now, Morgana the cat is...
I have a love-hate relationship with this cat.
Morgana the cat is a weird little talking cat that turns up out of nowhere and explains how the Persona metaverse works.
Yeah.
She is determined that she was at least at some point a human.
He.
No.
Morgana is a he.
No.
Yeah.
No, maybe this happens later in the game, but this is something that came up with Morgana that's even more interesting and weird. First of all, Morgana is definitely voiced by a woman. 100% voiced by a woman.
I got this very confused as well. I thought that they identified as a woman early on as well. But then I think there is a bit where everybody else refers to Morgana as he.
Except there's a conversation where they go, is Morgana a he?
Yeah.
And then Morgana goes, I think I'm a he.
Well, this is it.
Because Morgana is a cat who doesn't know if they used to be a human.
Yeah.
They think they used to be a human. They're very interested and obsessed with human desire. So maybe Morgana is a he. Definitely voiced by a woman. I think they're trying to do like the Timmy Turner thing of you get a woman in to play a young boy, but then Morgana's not a young boy, Morgana is a cat.
I mean, they explain what Morgana is at the end of the game.
Yeah, I assumed they would.
Of course they do. I think, yeah.
But the crucial factor about Morgana that is relevant to this discussion is Morgana is obsessed with Anne.
Obsessed with her.
Absolutely obsessed with Anne. Has a massive crush on her. Yeah. This is initially very cute because they are a cat.
Yeah. This
stops being cute because it's not just that Morgana has a crush on Anne. It is that Morgana really wants to have sex with Anne. It's not just cute. And this drove me. They're constantly trying to give this game the benefit of the doubt, particularly towards his character, because again, I was initially really taken aback with how unusual it was for a Japanese game about a teenage schoolgirl to turn around and say, "Stop sexualizing a teenage schoolgirl." Mm-hmm. Except that there are dialogues that are just they're throwaway dialogues. There's a mechanic that turns up later in the game where there's basically an infinitely grindable dungeon. I don't want to get too much into it because it's
a bit boring.
It's basically a way to level up characters.
Yes.
And there's little throwaway bits of dialogue that they do in the dungeon. And one of them is that basically Anne mentions that her catsuit is now a bit too tight. And she worries that her boobs have gotten bigger since she was last in the catsuit. And Morgana immediately pervs on this straight away.
I think I completely missed this.
Yeah, there's a section that during...
Is this just while they're talking as they're moving through the dungeon?
Yeah, it's not like... This is the thing that annoyed me about it, is it's not like a story moment. It's not like something that is like an unavoidable thing that happens in the story. It's a casual throwaway bit of dialogue done for a bit of fun, and the joke is supposed to be, haha, Morgana wants to have sex with a teenage girl. But also, this is going to take way too long to explain, but during the sequence, Morgana is a bus.
Yes. And
they're all sat inside of Morgana as a bus, and at one point Morgana says, I can feel Anne's bum on me, and I like it, and I'm like, I hate this.
Yeah, that is probably the cringiest part. I hate it.
And it's just this weird disconnect, because I'm like, no, you were doing really well about this theme, and then
you're chucking his cat.
But it's like you're throwing it away. You're throwing away the credibility you gave yourselves, and you gave yourselves a bit of buffer to have sexualized elements of the character that make sense in the plot, but also tell the audience, you're wrong for wanting to sexualize the character. And it was really an interesting breakdown of a very strong cultural trope. And then the story's over. She's hot, isn't she?
No, Morgana the cat is, and you bang on. It is a very weird part of the story. I do think that they go into, as you build the levels with the confidants outside of the palaces. I think that's where you get a lot more of their personal stories, especially as you get to the end of you can level them up to rank 10.
Yeah.
And once you get to rank 10, you have fully formed a bond with them is the idea. And if they are a character that's one of your party members, their persona evolves into a better persona at that point. And they have some excellent stories. And Anne is one of the ones that has a really, really good story. Another character that you get down the line, Makoto,
I think I have met that character.
You meet Makoto.
They're not on side yet, as it were.
No. But when they become a party member, again, their persona is really good, and it's a real critique of the need to be overachieving in Japan.
Yes.
And actually sort of focusing on, is this undermining this poor girl? She's being pushed around by everyone because they keep threatening her with college, and I need to write you a recommendation letter for college.
I saw that happen. And
she's just becoming a tool for other people to use.
And brilliant. It's sort of I don't know what the proper phrase for it, but it's satirical, but not necessarily humorous. It's it's a legitimate critique of things going on in the culture of Japan, and also obviously outside of Japan.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, there's elements of Persona 5 that are sort of capturing the spirit of what would go on to become the Me Too movement before then. There's sort of this idea of actually quite a lot of what's going on in Persona 5 is that grown-ups are not talking about the abusive things that are going on. And the game solution to expose them is supernatural thieves.
Yeah.
The game opens as well with a particularly impressive sequence in which you are breaking into a casino.
Yeah.
And you are 100% sold on how cool it is that they are thieves.
Yeah.
And it's very, very fun. And then you get the game's done in a sort of flashback situation where you're being interrogated about the thing that's happened. So it's I'm on board with the story elements. I'm interested to see where it goes. I think it's completely tone deaf what they've done with Anne, and I'm really disappointed in them for that.
Yeah, that is definitely the worst part of the story in terms of, being tone deaf.
Yeah.
I think they hit, with the other female characters specifically, they hit some really good notes. One of the last members that you get, which is disappointing because you're sort of near the end of the game by the time you get her, is being threatened with a forced engagement, and the aim of that part is actually to change the heart of someone to stop this happening, basically, because they're going to force a marriage. And I think that's again really, really well done. And stuff is not at all. In comparison with, and they're doing some great stuff with Shiho, who is Anne's friend.
Yes,
and it's how are you getting these so
This is the thing. It feels like there's maybe a few writers on the team, and one of them's come in with this very strong agenda of what they want the game to be about. Yeah. And for the most part, they're succeeding. For the most part, they're basically going there is a silent the opening plot point of the game is that your character intervened on an assault, and they were the one that got put on probation and went to prison.
Yeah.
And it's just immediately just basically going, the system is unjust and corrupt.
Yeah.
And there's a fascinating thing. Like I say, I've only finished the first dungeon, but basically at the end of the first dungeon, the crimes come out as to what's been going on, and things sort of like take a turn. Except the thing that the grown-ups are all concerned about isn't the welfare of the students. It's the fallout of the reputation of the school. It's the fallout of the idea that they're going to have to like find out who like why did this happen.
Yeah, who's been these phantom thieves?
Yeah. Is it real? Are these supernatural things going on actually a thing? How do we stop it? How do we find what's going on? There's very few of the characters who aren't the children, who aren't the students of the school. Go, how on earth did this abuse go on for so long uninterrupted? It's genuinely quite sad in a way.
And an interesting addition to that is the fan site. So the character, the character that you go to on the volleyball team, who sort of is the first whistleblower against Kamoshida, the abusive teacher, he afterwards is like, "Oh, these phantom thieves have done such a great thing. I would have been expelled and subject to further abuse. I'm going to set up this website, the fan site, spelled with a PH because it's funny, like Phantom fan site, and it has a little sort of opinion poll."
Yes. Do you think they're real?
Yeah. Do you think they're real? And this changes during the game, which is really cool. Where it starts to and again, I don't want to spoil too much, just in case you do decide to carry on and play through the rest of the game. But they raise questions amongst themselves as well as to is what they're doing real justice? Are they right? Is this right? Are they actually, changing these people, or are they just altering them to become a different version of themselves? Have they any right to go into people's conscious and change their consciousness, essentially, and their idea of morality, even if that's got a net positive? And that's where like the poll changes to, are the phantom thieves just, rather than just
I see. Are they real?
As people go, they're real. Are they doing the right thing? And it's interesting to see little comments pop up and say, like, some people positive, negative, and that whole, how are they presented in the media? When we know they're up to 7 kids just jumping into a supernatural palace and changing their mind. But the media has no idea how they're doing these things or why.
And again, there's the fixation on their actions as opposed to the actions of the people that they're changing.
Yeah.
Like, again, I don't know the future ones. Maybe it's the case that it's different with other ones. But certainly the overwhelming thing I got from completing the first palace and the consequences of that was that everyone was horrified that people had found out, not that it had happened.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this very... It captures a particular zeitgeist that, even though it came out in 2016, is still quite persistent. Where people now are like furious with people coming forward saying that they've done things without considering the actual action that's taken place. They'll say, "Oh, you've done it wrong. You've told the press about it wrong, or you've accused somebody in a situation where you can't necessarily prove it, and so therefore we think that you have bad intentions and stuff." And this game is sort of basically presents the supernatural like thought experiment of, what if you could just make people confess the thing they've been doing wrong? Like, not in a situation where you're an accuser who has to prove something. You literally have the power, and admittedly it takes a lot of boring JRPG combat to get there, but you can make people actually confess their sins.
And I think the first few palaces really stick to this.
Yeah.
And they are bad people, and we have to go in and change their minds for the good of society. And there's there's one palace which is the most interesting, just story-wise, where somebody asks you to go into their palace.
Wow! So sort of like an extreme version of therapy.
They are like, I am bad. I have done awful things. You need to come into my palace and steal or do what you need to do. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
I want you to change my heart. And that's where it's really cool. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, no, don't spoil that. That sounds fascinating.
But it's really, really interesting. And all the way through, they continue to tackle fairly hard-hitting topics, I think.
Yeah.
Most of the time it does revolve around some form of abuse, but it's I think it's well presented for the most part.
So this is the thing. I think I obviously haven't finished Story of Persona 5, so I can't judge it as a whole. The section I played, I thought was like fascinating, and one of the things I really admire about it, which is just such a stupid thing, I just like the fact that they have teenagers that actually swear and talk like teenagers do. Like they're not. This is I don't know what its rating is. I imagine it's a fairly mature rating because the themes get pretty hard.
I think it's a 15 or 16.
Yeah, I think a 15 would make. I think if this was a film, it'd probably be a 15, just because the themes are pretty dark. It's not a gory game necessarily, but it's certainly a bleak one.
Oh, one thing just to add before I can feel a wrap up.
Yeah. Well,
one thing to add is you do alongside confidants, you have skills as a character, and the way that you level up some of them is brilliant. Especially guts, where you just go and eat a big burger.
So this is actually, you've pulled me away from the wrap up a little bit there, because you're right. This is another mechanic in the game that I'm not
You're not sold on? Oh, I like the skills.
So the way the game works is that every day you can go and choose to do something.
Yeah.
And it's either like you can go and choose to study, you can go and choose to watch a film, you eat a burger.
Yeah.
All of these things are options on a menu. They're not things. They're not things you actually do, as it were. They just sort of...
Yeah, you go to a place in the game. For the most part, some of them you do. The batting cages you do.
Yeah, it's a pretty lame little mini-game. It's all right.
There's, I don't know if it's in Persona 5, but in Persona 5 Royal they have a fishing mini-game, which also increases your... proficiency, but you have to. You have 5 main skills: knowledge, proficiency, guts, charm, and kindness, which is an interesting skill.
I think kindness can be a skill.
Yeah, and you have to build up. I've seen a brilliant meme about this, but I'll reference it in a moment. But you have to build up these skills, and by doing so, is some of the time there is a block essentially to continuing to build your relationship with confidants.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain level of skill in one of these areas.
Yeah.
The funny one is Arn. After the first dungeon, you have to have at least a kindness 2 to be able to interact with Arn and continue to build that relationship. And the meme I saw was just, you do not have enough kindness to help Arn yet. And somebody just captioned it, I just don't care enough.
Even though she's being stalked.
Yeah, it's been awful. I just don't care. I need to learn how to care more.
Another one is you increase your charm by going to a bathhouse. I really don't understand that one. The thing I don't like about it is that it's so difficult to understand within the game's own rules what is going to pass time, what isn't going to pass time, and also there's like... The problem I had with it was there's a section after the first dungeon where like an exam's coming up.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, I need to go and study and knowledge.
Yeah.
I need to go and get my knowledge improved so that I can do the exam well. Except the game would not stop firing story things at me, meaning I was losing every single day. But one day I got a chance to do something, I accidentally passed the time by making a lockpick.
No.
Like, this is the problem with it. Even worse is that I made one lockpick and it went, you got enough time to make another one. And I went, well, no then, I'll go study. No, end of the day. Yeah. You should have made a second lockpick. I'm like, why was that an option? Why was the option stop making lockpicks?
I should just make lockpicks continuously.
If I can make 2 lockpicks,
just
and I
make
have
2.
them, yeah. But anyway, but it's frustrating because I feel like I'm constantly missing the optimal path, and I feel like there is an optimal path.
There is. I've seen online a very detailed walkthrough in what to do to build all your confident relationships to level 10, get all your skills up. I would argue that there should be no optimal path.
I agree.
And that really, in a game like this, I've finished it. I didn't max out. I maxed out about 3 confidants.
Yeah.
And that was my experience, and that was my story and my version of the game. And I think, there's a good 10 confidants, and trying to get them all to like level 10, you would have to be the most efficient in terms of playing it. I think the idea is, don't worry too much and just build the relationships with the people you want to build.
Right.
And do the things you want to do.
Does the game have alternative endings based on how you level up confidence?
Not really. I don't think so.
Not really, okay. Because I spent the whole game worried it was sort of like Mass Effect. That it was going to be like, if I don't build up particular relationships, we'll get to a suicide mission at the end and certain confidants won't make it.
No. It doesn't do anything like that. You can build a relationship, I think, with one of the... It's very heteronormative, but you can build... you can have a relationship, weirdly, with any one of the female confidants that you meet. Which is very weird for one specific reason.
I think I know which one it is.
Yeah.
Because I ended up finding... Because I was browsing the anime on all four, and then I found out what one of the twists of one of the characters was.
Yes.
And I was like, this is really backing my case that the game is, like, wanting to discuss the, sexual politics of Japan and critique them, but also really kind of enjoys sexualizing women with little thought.
Yeah. Again... I won't spoil it because for anybody who wants to play the game, it's a funny twist. But it does, again, if you build the relationship with that confidant, you find out more about why she's having to do certain things. And I think that, again, is really interesting. But on first glance, it does appear very tasteless and, like, weird. Really, really, really weird.
But again, maybe it's not so weird if you are from a Japanese culture that understands
potentially, yeah.
And I do feel like there is a little bit of that alienation from me. That actually, there is an element of, like, Persona 5 is, as I've said, I think, being quite subversive about the anime tropes it initially invokes. But I am not well versed in those tropes, so I'm not necessarily aware of the subversion.
And I think there is an element to it. Somebody's pointed out with the exams, etc. Some of it is just lost in translation as to what you would just know and what you wouldn't know. And
there's stuff about Japanese folklore.
There's some bits that you do pick up in the lessons that happen, and if you remember the lessons from a month ago in game, then you'll be able to answer the question. It does have a cool online feature with some of the regular lessons where you can see what other people have put.
Yeah, the cheat button.
The cheat button. With the exams, I think I just looked them all up because there was no way of knowing half of them.
I generally, with the exam, so some of them I did know. Some of them were like, translate the German word Wunderkind. And I'm like, great, I know that.
And again, that was covered in a lesson. But I think some of the questions just aren't, and you sort of have to guess.
Well, like I said, there's one that's famously about a Japanese folklore figure. And they were like, this Japanese folklore figure is the invocation of which original phrase? And then it just lists the phrase, and I went, I've never...
No idea. Or what does this Japanese kanji symbol mean? And you're like... What? How? Well, I'm not Japanese. I don't know.
I do like, though, it's a weird consistency, is that basically every single one of the lessons you have is about, like, you, essentially.
Yes.
It's sort of like, it's about prodigies, it's about rebels, it's about justice, and it's sort of like, this is like...
and they all sort of relate to what's happening in terms of the palace that you're taking on.
Yes, yeah.
And the characters that you're unlocking... and especially like their personas, there's often questions coming up in class related to one of your character's personas, and saying, Arsene was known as who, and
I forgot about that. Your persona is
your initial persona is Arsene, who is like, you can execute me now, I'll be back. And
the problem I had with it was I feel in most video games, you can take your time and do what you like because you are in this sort of theoretical time lock. Like in Ghost of Tsushima, there is no time limit on saving Tsushima. Yeah. There's no like...
Sun goes down, sun comes up. Still the same day, apparently.
Yeah, you can just keep going and nothing really matters too much. Persona 5, time will run out. The game will end eventually.
And there are points where it does jump forward a few days unexpectedly, which are probably... the most annoying. It's not Fable 3 levels of annoying where you're like, I have 200 days left before the invasion. Go to sleep. It's the invasion now. What?
Fable 3 is a fascinating game for me because it's flawed as hell and very interesting.
But
anyway, Persona 5.
But in terms of Persona and its day-to-day system, I do like that there is a level of yes, you can. You could follow an online guide to do this the most efficiently, or you could just play it go to the confidants that you want to spend time with and find out more about. Go to new areas that unlock. Read books about places in Tokyo, and then they unlock for you to go to. You can, sometimes a person will be like, you could either spend the day people watching with me, or we could go somewhere, and then you can just pick somewhere on the map and go somewhere on the map with them, and depending upon where you go, it might build their relationship with you a bit quicker, or they might not like it and it builds it slower.
This is the thing. This is why I was kind of saying this is really more of a visual novel.
Yeah.
Because the gameplay of these sections is menu selection. You pick different menu options, and then based on your menu option picks, you build you're basically just, it's a choose your own adventure book. You're ultimately being funneled back into the same story. You sort of the game widens out. You pick a few different things. The game narrows back in. You do the temple.
It's not like a true RPG in the sense of there is a multitude of different endings. There are a multitude of different endings, but all of them are if you fail along the way. It will show you a different ending depending upon how far into the game you get before you failed.
Did you ever play a game called Fahrenheit or Indigo Prophecy?
No, I heard of them, but I've never played them.
They have the most beautiful game over because it's a heavy rain style game, but it has game over screens,
right?
So you can totally fail, and every single game over screen has an ending.
It's
absolutely hilarious because one of them is just the character is just overwhelmed with how, like, there is an ending in which you're playing as a police officer, and if she gets too tired, she just gives up.
I love games that have those sort of fake endings. What's the big one was Far Cry 4, where if you just stick around and wait for the food to arrive, he's like, let's go blow some stuff up. You just get on a helicopter. I think Nier Automata has a bit where if you go into the inventory screen, you can remove her CPU, and that's an ending.
There's an ending in Nier Automata where she just eats a fish and dies. There's just a woman who's just like, I want to find out what happens if you eat a mackerel, and the robot's like, it's delicious, and then it fried my circuitry.
Again, it's like I never had one of the game over screens because I always did try to do the palaces in time.
Yeah,
but I think that they do a little bit about what happens if you get to that point.
It's kind of cute though because you can just look it up.
Yeah.
And like, I think there's a certain element to Persona 5 and certainly more modern video games where now the alternative ending thing is cute.
Yeah.
But you just go on YouTube.
Well, and I suppose that sort of plays into this the whole, you build the relationships with the people you want to build them with. Some I didn't even know were confidants until like really late game where they sort of went, hey, there's a confidant here. I was like, hang on, why can I never build up my son persona? Like, that public speaker on the street is apparently a confidant. And I just never went to work in the beef bowl place. That's where he goes, and then you talk to him. But I do think, confidants are brilliant. The way that they give you additional skills that feed into the gameplay is fab. There's some really good ones that you get later on.
Okay.
Again, it sort of builds to the ones that you get as you go up. One thing that you won't have got to I'll quickly mention is the showtime moves, which you get between different members of your party. At some point, it will just come up as, come on, Panther, let's do this. And then you'll hit the big button on your PS4 controller. The middle one. I'll raise it again in a second. You hit that, and then a little sequence plays where two of your team up and do a special move. Yeah, that's fun. But it's like specific to who they are. The best one, Ryuji and I think Makoto are like in a Wild West town and just walk up and he like smacks something with his big baseball bat and it just does a lot of damage. But you need to build up relationships to do that. Another little fun thing doesn't affect how you'll feel about this game at all. But if you're in Morgana in the truck and you stroke the touchpad, she purrs.
I tried to do it. It didn't work.
Or if you press it goes meow because it's like you're driving and you hit the horn. Hit the horn.
A side note about that: Morgana turning into a bus is brilliant because she just goes. Apparently, there is a collective idea that cats can turn into buses. And it's just like. Is there?
Well, this is why where the guns come from as well, because they're all just toy guns.
Oh, but in the metaverse, they manifest. It's the hyperliteralism idea.
It's what how people perceive them. So if you pull out a gun in the metaverse,
and
the monsters perceive it as being a gun. Therefore, it functions as a gun, which I think they could have done more with. like take toy versions of whatever you want.
There's an interesting idea about. This is the thing that's frustrating about Persona in some respects, is that there's a cool the idea of the metaverse is if you are perceived in a certain way, then that becomes reality.
Yes.
Except they only really use that in order to like create a new aesthetic.
Although
there's no like puzzle element.
There is again in later palaces where you reach a roadblock in the palace where you can't go forward, and it's because that person's palace, they regard this place as a place in reality which they view as secure. So you have to get into that place in reality.
Make them feel insecure.
Show that you're in there to them. Right. And then they will have the cognition that that place is now open and you can carry on in the
palace. That's kind of in the first palace, because this idea of you have to give them a calling card.
Yeah, that's to make the treasure appear. You always have to do the calling card.
Which is sort of this idea of basically it is that idea of basically you make the person scared for their own security, and that exposes their ability, which is a kind of a fun thing because it also means you can't do it in secret. It means that at some point you have
to make it known, and also just when you go into the palace for that final heist, this is my favourite part. Right, the security level goes up to. There's a really cool animation of the security level just ticking up to 100. Alarms are going off. It kicks in with an amazing soundtrack. And you're just like rushing through, and it's brilliant. That's one of my favourite parts of the game. Is just that final heist bit,
and it is cool, and it does feel like a heist. And I feel like that's one of the most successful things about Persona is I can't think of a heist game that is as successful at creating the excitement of a heist as Persona. Even though it is a turn-based JRPG, even though it is largely a visual novel, the music and the presentation are so strong that you're right, I'm excited to get back in, even though I know it's going to be more or less the same thing I've been doing every single time I've gone to the palace. So this is the wrap-up on Persona 5, which is now one of the most difficult games for me to assess, because I know it's probably going to get better. I've normally said on these things when I haven't finished a game, even if I haven't finished it, I get a very strong sense for what a game is about and whether or not I like it and whether or not I'm going to keep playing it. So there have been strategy games that have turned up in this series that I haven't finished and I've gone, but it's not going to drastically change and it's not going to finish. I think Persona 5 probably is going to keep getting better. I genuinely think so. I genuinely think the attachment I would have to the story would increase.
Yes, I think the story gets as you get more members of the Phantom Thieves as well and explore them. As you explore even the ones that you've already recruited, Ryuji, I would highly recommend just keep doing the confidant stuff with Ryuji because it's a really interesting story about why he's so aggressive and angry all the time. There's the brilliant backstories to all of them, and I suppose like the philosophy and psychology of their actions. They try at one point to just go, this whole thing, there is a science behind it. And then they just go, there is science. And they don't explain any of it. And I think that's the best thing they can do. Never try to properly explain it. Just go, this person was working on research about the metaverse. What was that research? We'll never tell.
I do feel like they could calm down with some of the explanation about the metaverse. I'm kind of all right with it's just like, it's a parallel world that reflects like human corruption. That's fine. That's all you needed to say.
It gets wild. I would carry on.
So this is the thing. I came into this podcast with... Before we sat down to record, I came in going, I was ready to basically go, I don't think it is the best video game I've ever played, because every time I was playing the combat, I wanted to get back to the story, and every time I was playing the story, I wanted to get back to the combat. And I felt like constantly I was always missing the other half of the game, but then the reality of the other half of the game would set in, and I'd be like, I'm just reading a lot of text boxes. Okay, fine. God, could we get back to the combat, and I'm playing the combat going, okay, I'm just hitting things. God, I wish the story would pick back up. It was really interesting, but and I feel like I'm kind of trapped with the fact that maybe the reason I'm not as big on Persona 5 as I should be is because I don't have the life to give it.
I don't. From the sounds of it, Lewis, it sounds like you're not playing it in the best way for you. I would go into the palace for a bit, jump out, do another day or two, jump back in. It's designed to be able to do that.
But this is the thing. I don't like playing it on the television. I don't like playing it in a big television. I have to put my headphones on. I don't like the fact that this is an 100-hour game. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is like menu management, and a lot of it is like grindy combat. And there are really interesting sections and really interesting things that go on. It's also weird that like 70% of the game is voiced. Like there are large stretches of dialogue that don't have full voice acting. And I'm like, this is a shame. And this is not going to be like a helpful thing for anyone because there's nothing you can do about this.
No.
And certainly, if it happened, I don't think it would necessarily get me to play it from the start again. I really wish this was on a handheld console or my laptop because it'd be so much easier for me to just fuck around and play on it ages.
That's true. That is true. I think it would suit being on the Switch.
And it's weird that it's not, because it's been on the PS3, and the Switch is, like, as powerful.
A lot of people thought when they did the Persona 5 reveal for Smash, that was, like, a reveal that it was going to be on the Switch.
Yeah.
To be honest, it sounds like you should probably try Persona 5 Strikers, because that does real-time combat.
Yeah, but that's a Musu game, and I'm boring Musu games.
Musu game.
It's basically they put hundreds of enemy on screen and you press square
like
until they're all gone.
Warriors
it's exactly the same team as Hyrule Warriors. That's a Musu game.
Right. Yeah, I tried a little bit of that new one.
Do you know what I would love if it was like? If it
Final
was like Final Fantasy VII Remake. They took out all that turn-based combat and replaced it with the same system as in Final Fantasy. Because Final Fantasy VII Remake still lets you do spells, weaknesses, special types of attack. The thing that I really loved about Final Fantasy VII Remake was when I started playing it, I was like, oh, this is like a beat-em-up version of Final Fantasy. This is a lot more fun. And then as you got further into it, as I was like, oh no, it is still an RPG.
Yeah.
It's just now like dodging matters and resource management matters, and it's like a live thing that I have to engage with. There are fights in Final Fantasy VII Remake where I'm on the edge of my seat with tension and I'm focused and I'm trying to dodge everything and block everything, and I'm like, absolutely, that final fight in particular I found really difficult, but I was determined to win, and then I figured out that I could counter things far more easily than I thought I could. I've not been on the edge of my seat in a single fight in Persona 5. I'm just going through the motions of selecting the most optimal route every single time, and too much of the game is that. So the problem I have is I love the story, I love the aesthetic, I love the overall like ideas of the game. I think it's a beautifully executed version of what it is. I just don't think it was ever going to be something that was ever going to like catch my heart in the way that it was like.
That's fair. Is it better than the game that is currently? I don't know. What is the current game? Well, unless this is a spoiler, I don't want to spoil.
No, I think this one will come out after. So this is the thing: is that it's not so much that it's like the current reigning champion anymore. It used to be that system. I realised that was a flawed system pretty early on when I gave it to Sniper Elite 4 and then various other games. The truth is, right now, the best video games I've never played, if you want like a proper list of them, are probably Return of the Obra Dinn, Wonder Song, and Frostpunk.
I've never played any of those games.
Which is exactly why this podcast exists, Zach.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of this podcast is find the games people haven't played and they love. And of those three, like, I think it's not surprising Return of the Obra Dinn because it's a fairly well-known indie game. Wonder Song was completely out of the blue, and I adored it. And Frostpunk was, the reason I gave it was because it was in a genre I normally don't like. And it won me over because it overcame a lot of the flaws in that genre.
That's fair.
Persona 5 is a solid gold, amazing version of its genre.
Yeah.
But it has all of the problems of its genre. It's just really good at the stuff that excels. And I think I am probably going to keep playing it.
I would say if you can get to the palace I spoke about earlier. If you can get to that point and you're still not a fan, then don't bother.
So look, here's the really awkward thing now, Zach. My judgment on Persona 5 is I don't know.
Definitely the best game you've never played.
It basically, the conclusion is it might be.
It might be. It might be. Might well be.
I don't want to say it isn't. I don't want to say it isn't, but I don't want to say it is yet. So I feel like, and it's a frustrating thing because I didn't think this was a conclusion I could come to because I came in going, in my head, the notes I'd made, I went, it's not. It's really good, but it's not. At the end of this conversation...
It's a tricky one. I've seen a lot of critique online of Persona 5's first 4 to 5 hours because it is slow.
Oh my gosh.
It's a very slow opening. I do think in comparison to other games that have slow openings just for the sake of having really slow openings, it does teach you a fair amount about how the game works in those first 4 hours.
But this again feeds into the problem with Persona 5 is I agree that the first 4 to 5 hours are really slow. I also think they have to be. Yeah. Because there is a huge amount of exposition they have to get through. There is a huge amount of gameplay mechanics. They even do the thing you should do in a story that's going to have a slow opening, which is that it has a bombastic and wonderful opening set piece that's really exciting and feels like you're getting down to it. But it's too... there's no getting around it. Before the podcast, we were discussing The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which I think has the worst opening of any video game ever that's actually really slow. Good.
Yeah.
Because eventually Twilight Princess is brilliant. There's no reason Twilight Princess's opening has to be that slow, because it's not like it doesn't play exactly the same as Ocarina of Time.
I think a similar opening in terms of its need would be something like Red Dead 2, where it has a fairly slow couple of hours, but that is sort of to teach you how to play it.
It's not really to teach you how to play it.
I mean, you sort of get how to play it from that first mission where you go and shoot people.
The thing about Red Dead Redemption 2 is that it's made by people who want to give it the pacing of a slow, methodical, thoughtful, post-50s Western. It's trying to be it's got a deliberate artistic style. And
I suppose that's the same with Persona 5.
It's trying to be a post-1950s Western.
Not a post-1950s Western, but it's sort of trying to replicate the feeling of playing an anime.
Yeah, I was going to say, Persona 5 is episodic as hell. It's it literally builds up I feel like I've played season 1 of however many episodes of Persona 5 exist.
Oh, 100%,
and I have, and again, this is kind of why I'm I don't know. Because I know that the first series of anything is usually the clunkiest, because it's we've got to establish loads of stuff. Yeah. And I feel like I'm getting to the stage of Persona 5 where maybe, like you say, there's more things to establish in terms of extra mechanics, but they're okay, you've got your main characters, you've got the context of what they do and how they do it. I did worry that after I finished the first story, I was going to be all these characters were interconnected into this story in a way that really made sense and was emotional. I'm not really sure if they can pull that off a second time. It can't just be another teacher's corrupt. There's just going to be a series of fights against teachers.
No. Yeah. I think they do it in a very interesting way, in that obviously with the first palace you are very much on the back foot of what's is
going
this?
On. Yeah.
Whereas with the second and so on, it becomes more we sort of know what we're doing.
It kind of feels feels like they're moving into the next series. There's almost an admission by the game where it's sort of we should keep doing this for the good of everyone. And I'm okay, so we've gone into a superhero mentality rather than a we need to do this or our lives are doomed mentality.
Yeah. But again, I don't want to spoil too much because it sounds like you're going to carry on at least a bit.
I think I'm going to keep playing it, and I think as a result, and it's a frustrating conclusion, I'm going to have to say...
To be continued.
More or less. I'm not necessarily sure I'll do a full episode on this again, but I might catch up with you later.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And finish up and go, look, it might be. Because I feel as well, I played all of The Witcher 3 for this podcast.
That's long.
That's a long game.
I love The Witcher 3.
I liked The Witcher 3 more than I thought I would, and I was glad it was picked for the podcast in some respect because it was the excuse it gave me. But I also told myself, you are going to have to finish this game because you are probably going to be really critical of it, and you need to have the backing of knowing that, knowing what you're thinking is right. And The Witcher 3 was a game that, as I played it, it changed, my perception of it changed a lot. To the extent where at the start I was I like this more than I thought I would. And by the end I was oh, here's the game I was scared it was going to be. I feel with Persona I've got a similar thing happening. There's stuff early on in it that I'm this is really cool. And if you can lock this down, this is great. But I feel what I'm probably going to do is I might just drop it into easy. Because I don't feel the combat is something I'm massively into. And I don't feel
That's fair.
Forcing myself to try and engage with it, I think will make me more frustrated. Whereas if I could just play through the story, I think I'd have a great time.
Yeah, do that.
Which then leads to the final thing that I've been keeping in, and I've hinted at it earlier. There is just an anime of Persona 5.
Yes, there is. There's also a manga. You could do those if you want to. I suppose the big thing that I don't know. I haven't watched the anime.
Yeah.
I watched one episode of it, and it was all right. But I've played through the game, so I know the story. I suppose it misses those confidant builds, like the little stories that you have with the characters.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, my favourite part of Persona 5 are the individual character stories. And as you go on through the game, you become more and more, you feel for them a bit more. You have a bit more of a relationship with them.
Yeah.
It's up to you. If you just want the basic story, watch the anime.
But then this is the problem.
But
is Persona 5 the best video game I've never played? Well, if it isn't, you can go watch the anime. So, I hate to say, does Persona 5 need to be a video game? Because I've played it. Yes. And I'm like, if you like this type of video game, it absolutely should be a video game. Because it has, even though I don't like turn-based JRPG combat, if you do, it's brilliant. Even though I'm not massive on the visual novel thing, and, you've explained, the confidant thing, is... It engages the player in the sense that, the fact it has a limited timescale, you're investing in a character because you personally actually want to know where that story goes. Yeah. I'm sure, as you said, there's a completionist way to do all of them. Yeah. But if you're going in blind and you don't really know it, the characters you'll gravitate towards helping are the characters you, the player, care about. So there is a legitimate reflection of gameplay. So I don't think I could... the easy criticism for me to do would be to go... Oh, Persona 5 is not a very good game. It's a good story, and there's loads of ways to do it. But I think maybe the medium does matter. I think you're right. There's a little bit of me that sort of feels like maybe there's a sort of Stockholm Syndrome element to Persona 5. And as there is with any video game that's hundreds of hours long, where you're like, I love this character because I've spent 70 hours with them. Yeah. Which, again, was something I felt like a lot of The Witcher 3, a lot of the love that game gets is because it's very long and they have lots of strong, detailed character breakdowns. But I raced through it without doing any of the side stuff, and people were like, how can you say this character's shallow? And I'm like, because of the fact the things that they say they do. Persona, even though I'm racing through it, even though I'm not doing side quests, side note, I'm not entirely sure I found a way to do side quests in the game.
The only side quests that are properly in Persona 5 are from the fan site. You get requests to go into that stuff, which is just to go into mementos, which is it's like a big dungeon. The challenge dungeon-y sort of space.
And again, I was doing that because I'm like, well, I should level up the character before I do the next dungeon.
That's sort of that function. Sometimes from them you get some new confidants, etc. You can get or new abilities or some nice items. But for the most part, they are the side quests. Yeah. There isn't anything really. I suppose the main side quest is the confidant relationship.
This is what I mean.
They would be your side quests.
I feel like I can, if I was to just blitz through Persona 5 and not massively engage with too much of the side content, I still feel like the characters are well written and I like them and I want to spend time with them.
The difference that I think it has to something like The Witcher 3 is that you are constantly surrounded by these characters as well. And they are interacting with each other as well as just you. You get to see how their stories fit in with the grander narrative, because they all sort of do fit into a grander narrative. There's a really good character, which I don't think you'll have met yet, who is... a lot of people love them, a lot of people hate them. Again, I think... you still haven't met quite a few of the really good ones, which is really annoying.
Because this is the problem.
Because you've still spent 13 hours already in it, which is a fairly long time to put into a video game when you're trying to balance lots of other games. I tend to be a person that picks a game and then sticks with that for a long time, and then goes on to another one.
So many things bouncing around now, and stuff on top of this podcast. But so the conclusion is Persona 5 the best video game I've never played? I'm going to put, NA asterisk, we'll find out later. If someone listening to this podcast right now knows that they like... If you like Pokemon, if you are someone who actually enjoys Pokemon, you should play Persona 5. Because Persona 5 is definitely better than Pokemon in my book.
Oh, it's 100% better. If you like Pokemon... I would say if you like most Final Fantasy games...
Yeah, again, something that's not... Final Fantasy VII is the only Final Fantasy VII
It's the only one I've played, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. But it's that sort of style. If you liked Fire Emblem Three Houses, you'll really like Persona 5.
And also, I love the Phoenix Wright games. And they have terrible gameplay. They're really bad point and clicks a lot of the time. But I love them because I love the characters and the story. And I think Persona 5 is probably a mark above Phoenix Wright in terms of writing. So if you like Phoenix Wright, you will probably love Persona 5. So this is the thing that's frustrating now, is I've gone, it's definitely better than a lot of other video games I've played. Maybe it is one of the best video games I've never played. Maybe I can just say that now. It doesn't have to be a top ranking. I don't have to say it's better than the other ones I've played. No,
of course not. Just has to be really good.
I'm going to back it. I think you've convinced me. This is the first time actually someone in a conversation has actually turned my head on it. Yeah, Persona 5 is the best video game I've never played.
And put it this way, if you're actively going away from the game and listening to music from the game in your car, that shows that it's having a lasting impact on you.
Yeah, no, aesthetically I think it's great.
It's beautiful.
I think I'm going to end up buying Joker in Smash. I remember when they announced him, I was like, who's this guy? I don't care. And now I'm like, he's pretty cool.
The best bit about it is the different stages you get in Smash, because you get the Memento stage, which is all the red and black. And then you can change it to the colour schemes depending upon the music for the previous Persona games. So it's chucked in Persona 4 and Persona 3 music. And then it changes it, because this one has a red aesthetic. Persona 5 goes all in on the red.
Red and black, yeah.
Yeah. And then Persona 4, I think, was all yellow and black. And Persona 3 was blue. So the characters tend to have something that fits with the colour scheme as well, which is, cool. I think it's a beautiful game. Despite it being developed for the PS3, it still looks fab.
Yeah, I think it looks fantastic.
And I don't think it's been held back by that at all.
But yeah, and you also mentioned the soundtrack, and there was a side note I wanted to say, which I was looking at the PlayStation Store, and they had a sale on, there's a rhythm game series based on the music from the Persona games. I was looking at the Persona 5 one, and I'm like, it could be fun to do a rhythm game. I looked up a review, and they went, the music in Persona 5 is wonderful, and because it's all laid-back jazz, it doesn't suit a rhythm game even slightly. It's got weird time signatures, and it's not exciting.
Yeah, the most rhythmic song in it is the combat song, and you've already said that you're sick of that one.
No, I still love it. It's a pain in the arse when you have to listen to it from the start over and over again. But the actual song itself is beautiful, and it has a main theme as well that's really great as well.
Yes.
I can't remember what it's called, but it's something to do with life.
Which was there's one that's like Steal Your Heart, which I think is the one that plays when you're doing the heists.
Yes, and it's the big exciting.
Yeah. Beneath the Mask is the one that's like the really chill one when you're in like the coffee shop and stuff. Yeah. And it's just some lovely.
So that's it. I'm legitimately glad, because I'm now probably after this going to go and play Persona 5.
Play it. It's good.
And have a good time. Thanks very much for coming on, Zach.
Yeah, no problem. No worries.
Well, there we go. That was Zack Sizer with Persona 5, a video game that I really genuinely was surprised at how much I liked. I will be honest with you, after that chat, I did try and go and play more. I didn't get much further because I got distracted, and I am now currently touring the country with Any Suggestions Doctor, the improvised Doctor Who parody, and as a result, I don't have time to do anything. So here's hoping one day I will be able to go back and finish Persona 5. But I feel like that chat, it was a really good chat. I will say, upon reflection on it, I feel like Persona 5 getting the Best Game You've Never Played award is heavily asterisked. It's like if you were to rank all of the games I've given that title to, it's very low down my list, because I still think I've got a lot of problems with it. But it's almost too interesting and too good. It's too well produced to overlook and pretend it isn't really, really good at what it's trying to do. So that's why this conversation was so long. That's why it's such a good time to talk about it. Hey, I've already mentioned it twice in this podcast, but I'm going to talk about it a third time. Zach and I are both in a show called Any Suggestions Doctor, the improvised Doctor Who parody. It is an improvised episode of Doctor Who based on audience suggestions. It's been to Edinburgh. It's had 5-star reviews. It's had 4-star reviews. It's also had other reviews. Ignore those ones. But the 5-star and 4-star reviews are big time. We've had people endorse it, like John Coleshaw, who you might know is a very famous impressionist from Dead Ringers. He came and saw the show. He loved it. It's a very fun time. If you go to anysuggestionsimprov.co.uk, you can see the list of tour dates that we currently have up. It's just top-notch fun, guys. We've done 2 of the tour dates so far. It's proving to be a fascinating experience doing a touring show. It's very tiring. But it is a lot of fun, and I would, if you're listening to this, you probably already know, probably because the other episodes of this podcast also contain adverts for the show. But this project means a lot to me personally. It's a real extrapolation of all of the things I've been doing over the years into an actual marketable product. So let's see how it goes. Zack also does the Siliad, which is an improvised myths and legends show. That's currently awaiting some dates to get out on the road. But if you follow them on Twitter and possibly Instagram, I don't have Instagram, so I don't know. But the Siliad is out there. They make really funny content while they're awaiting their next ability to do shows and tours. I'm sure it can't be too far off. There's only so long that humanity will tolerate living indoors for the entirety of its existence. Thank you very much for listening. If you like the show, you can subscribe, you can review it. This is just a bit at the end of the podcast where I really ask you to validate my existence by either coming to see my tour shows, supporting my guests, or supporting it, at the very least, support this thing. Which, if you've gotten this far into the episode and you've gotten to the end, surely you have some feelings about this show. It can't just be, even if it's meh, even if you don't, you've got an opinion now. So why not share that opinion on a podcast platform? Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe.